you very much as well for the friendly invitation. I was asked to speak about social democracy and the ongoing crisis. And at my institute, 2 years ago, we conducted a study comparing different social democratic parties in Europe, and especially with a view on the organizational and structural reforms that these parties tried to establish during the last 10 or 15 years. And all of these parties were center, southern, and a little bit eastern European parties. And one of the main conclusions was that reforms of organization, or party organization, could only be successful if there was a parallel shift and an explanation with a new or a different social democratic story or narrative. So if a structure change was given a reason or an underlining with a narrative. And now, this year, and we're still finishing this, we're again, in cooperation with the Ebert Foundation, conducting a study searching for these narratives and comparing 9 different social democratic parties in Europe, asking if there is, maybe in the last 5 or 10 years, a change in their perception of social democracy. So if in the story they tell from their own party, and in the vision they have for their own future and the role they play within. So this is maybe the background or the reason why I was asked to talk here. And I would like to emphasize at the beginning that, in my opinion, the discussion around this economic and financial crisis now is, in my opinion, centered all too much in the search of objective and really hard reasons. I would say at the same time that the discussion about the economic crisis underestimates psychological shifts and developments that take place at the same time and are triggered through this crisis. If we search for reasons and solutions of that crisis, if we talk about social democratic strategies to maybe overcome or to play a stronger role in managing this crisis, one should not forget that economics and even more political science, which is the field I come from, are science fields where psychological tendencies often very fast become objective facts through the behavior of people. So I think the discussion of the crisis should not be, and maybe not even in first line or at first hand, should be a discussion of numbers or economic strategies or economic policies, but even more the discussion of how to talk and how to put out state role, society, and economic imbalance. And I think this discussion of present social democracy has to bear this in mind very strongly, where to put the emphasis. For example, there's a discrepancy in the perception of what should be the ideal role of the state in present societies, I would say, almost all over Europe and in each of the parties we look at. And on the one hand, the mistrust or the distrust towards modern capitalism and the financial sector leads to demands and proposals calling for a more active, guiding, and involving state, which is evident, maybe in a crisis that we have now. But on the other hand, the history and the experience of social democracy government, for example, and of neoliberal dominated discourse throughout the last 30 years have at the same time led to a growing skepticism concerning the capacities of that same state. So we want, or societies discuss and want a more active, maybe a more protecting state, but at the same time they do not feel they do not believe that same state would be able to do that. So this is a problem that both sides of that discussion feel strong support through the crisis. Both sides see their reasons or their argumentation underlined with this crisis. And a similar discrepancy we find within those social democratic parties. That first of all, I would like to underline that almost all parties we looked at had an opposition role in their time. So we looked at the French discussions before the election took place. I think one of the parties that were in government, when we looked at the party discussions or the party program, is Denmark, and we did not look at Slovakia. That was maybe one of the blind points of that study. But one should bear that in mind, that we have a social democratic party family in opposition mainly in Europe up to now. But we found that in almost all countries we looked at, there was a strong awareness of the need to talk about key issues and central columns of society organization, of state, capitalism, and of social democracy as a whole. So the social democratic parties feel the need to discuss about what social democratic or social democracy should be today. But at the same time, and on the other hand, all discussions were strictly or strongly restricted by the necessity of showing governmental capacity. So discussions about what should be the social democracy of the future, of maybe what society do we want in 20 or 30 years, at the same time are restricted by, no, we cannot discuss this now because we need to show our capacity to manage crisis. And we can only discuss under budget restriction, which makes it quite difficult. But we do see changes and shifts in the role social democracy wants the state and public institutions to play. And I would like to point out some examples of that, what we found quite interesting. So there's as I said, there's a tendency of more and stronger public institutions. Strongly, for example, in the discussions that take place in Great Britain. And even stronger and more underlined and maybe more important because of the elections in France. So the French discussions and the French election program underlines a very active, very guiding role of the state, not only in the industry, but even more in social politics and in the combining or the connection between society and economy. This is one point, but deeper going, maybe there's a change in what social democracy wants concerning the decision guidelines for public institutions. So what should be the decision ground for state and public institutions to act? In Sweden, for example, there's a discussion about the concept of, they call it the value of the fellow citizen, which should always be the decision ground for public institutions. If a public institution takes a decision, it should always ask the question, what is the value this decision might bring for fellow citizens, for economy, or for other things. And the value of fellow citizens should always be the decision point. And on the further going, in Sweden, but also in Spain, we had a very strong discussion about democratization of society and economy, which is combined with the value of this fellow citizen, in my opinion. So, and this does not only mean maybe the possibility to, as we had in, for example, in Germany, of the structures that workers could have a certain voice and a certain power within their company, but also democratization of society means that the possibility that every citizen is able to speak up within bureaucracy, within public institutions, which is searching for the word, what is the attitude of the state when it meets its own citizens. This was a very strong point what the Spanish socialists tried to establish during their government term, that they tried to open up institutions to a quite strong degree, to make them able, or to make citizens able to meet their own institutions and to speak up within them. So, democrat or democracy within institutions, democracy within society was a very strong underlining in Spain and in Sweden. And then furthermore, we have the discussions about dignity within treatment of the own citizen, which we find in a lot of countries. In Spain, it is quite strong in the Scandinavian countries as well, and for example in Italy as well, where there's a discussion about a topic called il lavoro prima di tutto, which means the work, and they mean it, a work of dignity or something should be valued very strongly and should be very valued first of all. This would be connected with a discussion about the value of the fellow citizen, which I said as well. So, if I had to draw a conclusion concerning state, society, and economy, one could say that there is a strong sympathy for the model of Western Germany capitalism of the 60s, so where you have a very strong coordination of state, workers, and capital owners. But furthermore, one could maybe say that we have a mixture of third-way social democracy, but accompanied or underlined with more traditional concepts of security, of state role, and of democratization of bureaucracy and institutions. One general problem of discussing social democracy of the future or any utopia or vision of future social democracy is that one has to maybe find a new synthesis or a new composition of things that are there already, and that might be able to meet people's needs. And the combination of constructive critics and imagination of future is a crucial point in establishing a new and positive concept. But we have in almost all social democratic parties there is a hegemony of neoliberal or conservative discourses, even concerning the social democratic key issues. So if we say, or if we look at discussions about education or discussions about exclusion, inclusion, the arguments are often filled with neoliberal content. So education is important because we need it for competition, we need it for the economic value. And I think this explains in a good way how parties could win a discourse hegemony within their countries. You have to fill your issues with your own content, with your own with your own values, so to say. And up to now, or within the last 30 years, social democratic key issues or columns of their belief have been filled with neoliberal contents. In maybe not everything, and maybe not every social democratic value, but even solidarity might be argued today in a neoliberal way, that we say that solidarity in a society is important because if we behave or are guided by solidarity, this is important or this is good for economic factors, because if we do not have a great part of the society excluded, this is good for the social system. It is not argued in a way that this is important for our perception of society because we want emancipation of the oppressed, but it is economic factors that matter. And I think one has to bear this in mind that the one way to success or to be able to underline the own value structure and the own ideas of society and politics is to come up with terms and to come up with ideas filled with your own beliefs, and you have to take over the discourse. Might be the right term. But there are some best practice examples I could highlight now, but most remain sadly at a level of literature or slogans and are not even taken seriously by their own parties. Maybe one of the most interesting or the most thrilling discussions was the discussion about Blue Labour in Great Britain, which is exactly the thing I said. Blue Labour took the social democratic discourse and opened it up to some conservative points that they tried to combine with their own idea. So something attractive can arise when a discussion tries to pick up new elements that are possibly not from the own ideological center. For example, in the Great Britain case of Blue Labour, it has a tie with the own movement history, talking about the orientation towards associations at the local level, but it tries to take up or to combine with conservative perception of security at the local level, conservative perception and even at economic factors. And so this discussion, without going too deep into detail, was one of the most interesting we found at the European level now. And I would like to stop for now, and maybe we could enter into discussion afterwards. Thank you.